Hey guys, so in today's video I'm going to be doing my March wrap up. So in March I read 5 books in total, the first being The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. I don't have the book with me, but if I can figure it out, I'll put a picture up here. So with this book, I wasn't looking forward to hearing about Snow's story, and I really questioned that, as I think a lot of other people did at first. But I ended up liking this book quite a bit. I think, although Snow was an awful protagonist, like, he wasn't awful in the sense that he was badly written. He seemed real to me, like a kid that grew up rich and suddenly had it all ripped away from him, but didn't know how not to be a spoiled brat, essentially. So I really appreciated that aspect of it. I love when authors write books with characters that feel real. They don't just feel like I'm a 15-year-old who is the most wanted criminal in all of America. Like, that just doesn't make sense. That doesn't feel real. But this felt believable in a sense, I guess you could say. I know a lot of people didn't like this book and thought it was really slow, but I personally never had that issue. I think that it was fairly well paced. I really liked the Hunger Games portion of it. I think that part was that was probably my favorite part of the book. I think it did slow down a bit in the third part. Another thing about this book is it had a lot of lore. I really liked the lore portion of it. It gave us a better insight into how the Hunger Games started, what it started off as, and how it grew to be what it was. It also gave us a lot of background on District 12 and some of its traditions and where some of those came from, which I thought was really cool personally. I really enjoyed that aspect. But overall, I really did like this book, which, even though a lot of people didn't, I found it to be interesting. I really liked the background it gave us. I felt like it really developed Snow's character more, and it makes you understand a little bit more why he is the way he is in the original trilogy. And I ended up giving it 5 stars. I really liked it. Then the second book I read was Glass Sword by Victoria Aveyard. This is the second book of the Red Queen series. I thought this book was good. I devoured it in 2 days. I could not put it down. I think what helped with that is this book did have a lot of action, and I personally love books with action, which I know is funny because last book, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, a lot of people said it didn't have a lot of action, but for some reason I was okay with that, probably because I was already invested into the Hunger Games world and the world of Panem. But this book, I loved it. I ate it up so fast, and I didn't find it very repetitive, but I kind of concerned for future books in this series that they will start to get a bit repetitive in the plot. So I'm gonna look out for that. I also really like the development of the character of Mare through this. You can see her start to change in a way that isn't good, but I enjoyed that. It was kind of, I saw someone describe it as kind of a villain origin story, even though she's not supposed to be, which I agree with. But I personally enjoyed that development. I found this book to be predictable, but not in a sense that some books are predictable, but getting to the part that you predicted is very painful and it drags and you want it just to be over with. I felt like this, although it was predictable, you had fun reading to get to the part that you were guessing was going to happen anyways. I do wish this book had more points of view. I think Mare's point of view is very narrow, and I think it may just be a personal taste thing with me because I think I read a lot of books that have multiple points of view. Like all the rest of the books I read this month have multiple points of view. Well, except for the Hunger Games one. That one did not. But the rest of them did. So usually I read multiple person point of view books. So I think that's just a me issue. The third issue I have with this book is the love triangle. I just feel like she wanted to make it into a love triangle, but she also clearly favors one option over the other. So you can tell just by how she favors the one person who she's going to end up with in the end. So I just hate the love triangle trope in general. Overall, Glass Sword, 4 stars. The next book I read was The Boy on the Bridge by M.R. Carey. This is the second book to The Girl with All the Gifts, which I talked about this series in my ranking all the series I've read video. I really like this book as well. I don't think it was as good as the first. I think this is definitely more science based than relationship building based. It has a lot of medical and scientific terminology, which I could understand, but I'm not sure if people who aren't as well versed with that type of language would be able to understand it as well. It gave a lot of answers that the first book did not give you, but the ending of the first book, all the answers, well, not the answers, all the questions you had, you're all like, I guess those don't matter anymore. But in here, they give them to you anyways, which is great. This book did have a slow start, but once you got into it, it was pretty good. One of the main characters in it is on the spectrum, and I really like that portrayal, and I think that was very well done. So I feel like that's worth mentioning as well. I'd say this book had a bittersweet ending. It wasn't necessarily a fully unhappy ending, although some people aren't going to be happy with what happens to some of the characters and how the story ends for them. But I think overall there's good and bad in it, so that's why I'm calling it bittersweet ending. But I really like those kind of endings. I like an unhappy ending. I like a bittersweet ending. I feel like those are more realistic because not everything gets a happy ending. So overall, this book is 4 stars as well. The next book I read was a book that actually came out beginning of March, and that is Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare. This book emotionally devastated me. I was like reeling after I finished this book, and I need the third book to come out now. One of the issues I had with the first book, Chain of Gold, was the amount of exposition it had. I felt like it just had a really slow start and it had to do a lot of build up. I believe I ranked it 3.5 stars just because it took me so long to get into it and it felt like a drag to me up until like halfway through the book essentially. This book did not have that problem at all. It picks up 4 months after the last book and you're just right into things. I think this probably has the most diverse group of characters we've seen in a Shadowhunter book yet. One of the mains is Persian, and then there's another character from India, and obviously the main character, all the rest of her family is of Persian descent. So I think there's a lot more diversity than I've seen in other Shadowhunter books. Also, we have like 2 bisexual characters, 2 gay characters. Well, not 2 gay, 2 gay, 2 lesbian, there's quite a bit diversity sexuality wise in this book for sure, which I really enjoy and I really like to see. Another thing I really liked about this book is they present you with a problem, and me having read all the other main series of the Shadowhunter world, I'm all like, really, we're gonna do this again? But then she'd misdirect and it'd be something different. That's not to say there wasn't predictable parts in it, but the red herrings in this book worked really well, and I think they really show Cassandra Clare's growth as an author, and I really liked that. I think the romance in this book is also really wholesome. A lot of YA novels portray romance in kind of a toxic light. They're usually really codependent or really possessive, and in this book, I didn't really get that. It seemed like a fairly healthy relationship, which I love to see. Another thing I think Cassandra Clare is really good at is writing realistic characters. And I think the diversity she uses in her books help her with that. So I really enjoyed those as well. And the biggest issue I feel like with this book and with all Cassandra Clare books is that you kind of need to read all of them to get the full grasp of it. Sure, you could probably read this series and have a decent understanding of it, but you're not going to fully enjoy it as much if you don't read all of them, because it has so many like Easter eggs, I guess you could say, to other series, which make it more enjoyable. And you get a lot more of the world building in the other series, especially the Moral Instruments, since that was the first one. So that's where most of the world building is done. When I first finished this book, I gave it 4.5 stars. But once I thought about it more and how much I really liked it, I think I'm gonna up it to 5 stars. So that is Chain of Iron. And then the last book I read was The New Hunger by Isaac Marion. I just finished this today, so it's kind of fresh on my brain. This is the prequel to Warm Bodies, but I have not read Warm Bodies yet, and I found it's pretty hit or miss. Sometimes you can read the prequel before the original, and you're fine, and it works great, and sometimes it doesn't work, and that was the case with this. I got the overwhelming sense that I was supposed to know these characters already, and that it was relying on a prior connection to these characters. But obviously I didn't have that, so I didn't really feel connected to any of them. And this book was really good at making you question a lot of things, but not really answering them. Like, how did society break down? What caused it? All that, but it doesn't answer. It's also very vague in regard to the characters' backstories, which you think for a prequel it'd go more into them, but instead they just give you a vague idea of what happened. Which, in the case of the tall man, that makes sense because he can't remember who he is. But for the human mains, it doesn't really, because they have their memory intact. But I don't think this book was written poorly. I think I just read it out of order, and that's where a lot of my issues come from. Because I'm hoping most of the questions I have about the breakdown and all that are answered in the next book and the original. But I think a lot of this adds up to me just reading it in the wrong order. I think the premise and the approach to zombies in it is well done. I think it's interesting. I like the concept of sentient zombies, essentially. So I really do think that's cool, and I don't think it's a bad book by any means. I think it's just really confusing if you haven't read Warm Bodies prior to it. And it was mostly because of that I'm going to give it 3 stars. But like I said, I don't think it's a bad book. I don't think it's poorly written or anything like that. I just don't have all the information I need. And because of that, while I was reading it, I was really confused through most of the book. But that ends my March wrap up. If you like the video, make sure to give it a like, and if you want to see more of my videos, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I will see y'all later. Bye!